Hello, everyone. This is Michael Kelty again, and I'm going to try to give you a real concise overview of my training and personnel system, just as an example of some of the things that I've done over the years. This is a demo version, I should tell you. So if I show you things, you're just going to see data about me. It's going to be phony data for the most part. Or if you see something else, it's also phony. So I don't want to show any records of any actual employees for obvious reasons. But I should say, just technical stuff. This is a Microsoft Access front end with a SQL Server back end. And I should also say this is the full version of the application. Only certain people get this version, say like administrative people, center directors, the department director, and finance people principally will get the full version of this application. There is also a web reports version, which everybody has access to. And that is so that people can look at their requirements reports. Supervisors can look at their personnel action reports, which would be like annual reviews and that sort of thing. And so anything that people need to see that are not in that group of people that kind of have access to everybody, they get their own web reports. And the supervisory hierarchy, which I create through this system, is how I handle the access to those records. So a line employee would just get access to themselves. A supervisor would get access to themselves, and there's immediate supervisees and up the hierarchy. But this is kind of a, if you have access to this system, and like I said, only a few people do, you kind of have access to everything. So reports, I've already mentioned reports. Employee requirements and dates, I'm going to bring up just an example. This is kind of a big report. I keep track of the requirements for the position. I tie training requirements to the position because the positions tend to be fairly static. People come and go. And but I do, when if somebody takes a training that satisfies a requirement, those training records are tied to the person. So this is an example of, I've got the requirements for the position. These are expiring requirements. These are the ones that expire. One-time requirements, obviously. Untaken requirements. These records, I should tell you, don't worry about me. These are a small subset of the actual records. Extraneous requirements taken. If a training satisfies a requirement, but it's not one that is tied to the position, I still want to capture it as a requirement. Somebody might move from one position to another, and the supervisors can see that they already took the necessary requirements this way. And then here within the training taken, this is sort of anything goes trainings that you may have taken, and it does keep track of the continuing education units, which are a very big deal in our labor context. So that's an example of one of the reports. Lots and lots of reports. Here I put one tab, demographic reports, financial reports, and past employees, contact information, location reports, all sorts of things like that. Some of the center directors that have access to this application only see this button. So that's another thing that I do for the sake of security is up here you can see my login name. It knows that I'm me. And I capture your Windows authentication login when you first log into the application, and I kind of parcel out which parts of the application you get to see. I obviously get to see everything because I'm the guy who wrote the thing, but a lot of people will only see like 2 or 3 buttons out of all of these. So here's edit existing employee records. This is sort of if you just want to bebop around and look at stuff related to the employee, you come here. There's background check stuff, whether or not it's been taken care of, their job description. Chronos data, this would be like, how much you're paid and your sick leave balance and that sort of thing. I do get that from a different system. Here, this is for demo. In my demo database, I don't have this would be like hire dates and that sort of thing, where you are in your personnel actions, whether or not your employment type is full-time, part-time, temp, etc. Training education, this is your requirements taken. I've already shown you a bit of that in the training taken. Again, training needed, this would be, I need this training. Language skills, very important that we keep track of who can speak what language here because our client base our clients speak a bazillion different languages. I don't really have records for my degree because I'm a computer programmer and they know that I have a degree. But if you were a social worker or a clinician, it would be very important that we keep your degrees because it has to do with billing and that sort of thing. Same with licenses. When people have a license here, because that also affects billing, when I update the expires or the data entry person updates the expiration date of a license, it actually sends an automatic notification to the financial types so that they know that this person is eligible to receive Medicare, that sort of thing. Waivers are for requirements that a lot of our positions have a DMV requirement, but they might have hired somebody who doesn't have a driver's license, and they're just like, no, don't worry about it. They're never going to drive. So we give them a waiver. We give them a waiver instead of taking the requirement out because, again, requirements are tied to the position. So that person might leave or they might go to a different position, and the next person that comes in, we need to know that that person is supposed to be able to drive. And these are the requirements. One of the many places where you will see it. Okay. It's something that, it has like your address and stuff like that and contact information as well. Remove an employee from position. I kind of make them go through this report when they remove somebody from a position here or they terminate somebody because number one, my supervisory hierarchy demands that everybody has a supervisor at all times. So nobody is allowed to be terminated until you move their supervisees. And it tells you, this employee is not a supervisor. I'm not a supervisor. Up here, if you see down here, it says upcoming terminations. You can actually put somebody in here. If somebody's resigning in the future, you put the record here, and then the evening of that day, it will automatically go through the termination process for them, provided that their supervisees have been reassigned. Otherwise, I may have actually changed that. I may have actually coded it so that it automatically just moves everybody up one, but I don't remember. I know, I'm terrible. Okay, enter a new employee. This is sort of a wizardy kind of a thing. You put the employee ID, which may or may not come from the city. We have a lot of employees here that aren't in the main system because they're temps or they're interns and that sort of thing. But you fill in all their information, you hit save, and it sort of creates the employee record, and then you are able to enter the contact info, the education, the location info, and then you can assign them a position. When I assign a position to somebody in this system, that is when the initial notifications of a new employee go out. The initial notifications create tickets in our ticketing system, our IT ticketing system, and from there scripts can be run to create their Active Directory account and their email and that sort of thing. We've got that down to about a day, thanks to some scripts that my daughter wrote. Okay, change an employee's position. This is for people that are moving from one position to another, and so if they're staying within the department and they're just moving, we do have to send out some notifications, but not all of them. Obviously, we don't want to terminate their Active Directory account or their email or anything like that. That creates a lot of problems. We don't want to terminate necessarily their access to different systems like our electronic health record, maybe. And it does send out a notification. And the person who is in charge of that, which is for the most part me, can decide whether or not they need to have that access terminated or not. But it doesn't do anything automatically. And it creates the archive records that I needed to create. Most of this is happening, by the way, on the back end in SQL Server. I should mention that. I try to have the front end really do very little, and most of the really heavy lifting happening on the SQL Server end because I'm a SQL Server nerd and I love it. And that's where I want to do everything. Position stuff, this is kind of the form where you deal with all the requirements, the budget codes, and that sort of thing. Let me look at, you can see my position. And Let's IDs, this has to do with budgeting in the state. I get a certain amount of money from the state, and so they have to keep track of separate things for that. Okay, let's not waste too much time on that. enter a new position. It's basically similar to entering a new employee ID. You enter stuff and then you hit save and then you enter some other stuff. And it's kind of a wizard, kind of self-explanatory. Change supervisor records. This is a big deal. Again, like I said, you can't move people around without their supervisees being supervised by somebody. So we move people around, or in terms of their supervisor, fairly frequently. And this is just a form where you can, you select the older supervisor and then who is going to be the new supervisor, and then you just go, and it would only show the positions for the old supervisor, but you can kind of parcel out where you're sending the positions, because a position is supervised by a position to a certain extent. And so, yeah. Let's see, I don't want to, some of these things I don't want to bring up. Reinstate a former employee. We have, occasionally people leave and they really think they're going to leave, and then 3 months later they come back. And so I can actually click on this. I won't do it because it might show some people, and sort of reinstate them, and it'll kind of take everything and move it back in. So you don't have to, put all that stuff in again, because pretty much everything that is deleted out of the system goes to an archive table. It doesn't really get, deleted forever, because there's just a lot of problems. Very rarely is it a problem, but when it's a problem, it's a problem. If you know, you know. Enter training records. This is for like a big live training. So 20 people show up for a training. You can write the name of the training, how many hours it was, when it happened, who the instructor was. You can say whether it satisfied a requirement and which requirement it was. And then instead of just seeing my name, you would see all the names of all the people in the system, and you could kind of just go through and click, 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 and select all 20 of them and hit Save Recs, and it creates kind of an attendance and requirement record for everybody that it did the training. So, or you can come here. You've actually seen all of this stuff. I created this for the people who just deal with trainings and degrees and licenses, which is like a subset of the users. Like I said, some people don't see all of the parts of the application. So this is just for those people who deal with those records. And so they can change training records and that sort of thing. Assign a new training requirement. This is you can go through, and first you would create the training record, of course, and then you can go through and sort of en masse go through all the different positions and assign them all at once. Now, also somewhere I have it the other way. Like you can have a new employee or a new position, and then you just go through and assign them all the trainings requirements. So enter Dolores records. This is keeping track of phones and purchasing cards and that sort of stuff. Here's a name, but that's a phony name. Don't worry. Let's see. That's a good one. Manage temporary employees. There's nothing here, but if there was, that would be the temporary employees that are in the system. And one of the things we do here, I know I'm not showing you anything, I'm sorry, where it says end date. What we do is when a temporary employee starts, we say to the supervisor, the hiring supervisor, okay, when are they going to leave? And because we have some temps that actually have access to really sensitive systems, or I should say systems with sensitive data in them. And so we need to know that when they are going to leave, because sometimes, or it's happened in the past that temps have been hired, given access to systems, and then they just leave, and the supervisor doesn't tell anybody, or they forget. That's a bad situation, because we have people that don't work here anymore who can still access our systems, because more and more systems are, of course, in the cloud, and they are easier to access from outside the network. And so we need to manage the temps. Temps are automatically terminated on the end date. And yes, notifications go out prior to that saying, hey, to the supervisor, hey, supervisor, you have this temp. They're about to be terminated from the system. Is that okay? If you want them to stick around, if you're extending their temporary employment, then here's what you do. tech services inventory and tech services. This is some stuff we did to keep track of who has what computer. Download and move pay recs. This is actually, I get payroll recs from another system. In this system, we keep track of the budget codes and who has what budget code and how much, what portion of their job is whatever budget code. But that's sort of the idealized idea. That's the, budgeting, as I should say. And then the actual payroll records are handled in another system. So there's obviously a difference between the two because we have lots of at-will employees and people move around and sometimes they're paid in different ways. So there's the ideal, which is here, and then there's how they actually ended up getting paid, which is in another system. And of course, there's lots of different information we want to, how much sick leave you have, how much vacation leave you have, that sort of comes from those. Org codes management, that's a similar sort of thing. Here's all the different org codes that we have. We have a ton. Check this out. Blah. Okay. That is the public sector, my guys. I have another video about this. This is how I get records out of our LMS. Mark Center Drive records. This is, Mark Center is the enormous new office building that I made. We used to have multiple locations and people were just all over the place, but we have moved about 90% of our people into one spot. And so this is a fairly new, this is an example of new functionality that I put into the system because I wanted to kind of, for the first time ever, try to manage where people are at in terms of what floor they are on, what cubicle they're in, what office they're in. And so there's a lot of stuff like that. I should bring up, just to show you, I've told you that this is in SQL Server. I've been working on this for a long time, so you can see these are all tables. There's some temp tables I use for reports and that sort of thing. I have another video on DNS-less connections, which explains why I keep temp tables on the SQL Server side. Views, most of these are used. Some of these are just ones I'm, making for various reasons. You can see, don't even have names. But some of these are very old and are used constantly. Some of them I probably should go through and get rid of. But it's sand on the beach. These are all these views. Look at all these things. And here's my stored procedures. I use a lot of stored procedures. And they are doing a lot of the work. Every email notification goes through is created by a stored procedure and that sort of thing. So that's just sort of a look under the hood for those who care about that sort of thing. And that's it. I'm not going to bother you with anything else. That's more than enough time. So if you're still here, thank you for paying attention.